Hello, and welcome to this week's episode of Mastering Dungeons, your favorite tabletop role playing game news and interviews and game design podcast. I'm Shawn Merwin here with the not at all sick or not at all
Yeah.
hampered in any way, Teos Abadia. Hey, Teos.
If recording software knew what it was doing, it would just have a button for like, I have a cold, and you just click that and it just takes out those
Take,
thicker than usual sounds, get out that
yeah.
low mid-range rumble out of there. But yeah. Shawn, nonetheless, sickness cannot stop me from being so happy about all the awesomeness that you and I saw at GameholeCon. We got together with friends. The community from Mastering Dungeons was there in full force. We had a taco night. We had super cool Flump Fanatic badges. I mean, just absurd good times. It was so nice. I saw people at my games. It was, in the halls, everywhere. Just lovely, and I'm still on cloud nine for that, and I think I will be for the rest of the year.
Yeah, when I read the Patreon backers at the end of the show, it's going to be like, yep, check, check, check. So many wonderful folks there sharing their thoughts, asking questions, coming to our live recording. Just absolutely amazing to go to this convention, to see all the folks that we know and that we become friends with. It's amazing.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I want to give a special thanks also to Doug Hopkins. Doug, Teos, you worked with Doug when you were doing some of the work on Hero Quest. And oh yeah, right over there. And Doug was running Hero Quest. Doug introduced himself to me. I'd heard the name, I've never met him. I didn't realize he also wrote for Living Forgotten Realms.
Yeah.
Once I put the name to the adventures, I was like, oh yeah. Yeah. And so we chatted about that for a minute, but he also gifted me a copy of Hero Quest First Light, which is the Hero Quest sort of beginner game. And so I was excited to see it. I opened it. We played it on Friday night this past weekend, and the immediate reaction from the Merwin family was, can we play again? And so we
Awesome.
played the second quest the next day. So much fun, very exciting. So Doug, it was great to meet you, and thank you.
Yeah, Doug is superb, wonderful to work with. I also got some cool stuff at the con, Chain Link by our awesome friend Ethan Yen, which is really cool, and a copy of Apocalypse, which was a really neat project that I worked on quite some time ago, but finally got a copy from Alan Tucker, which is neat to see in print. I'd seen it in digital back when it first came out, so super cool to get that. Both of those are available for anybody who wants to go out and find them. Chainlink or Apocalypse, you can find that. It's really cool.
Yeah, so we are counting down the days until the next GameholeCon. What we are not counting down the days for is talking to our listeners. So we have some emails from our listeners this week. We have a lot of news, so we're only going to do a couple of these, but we thought we'd get them in, starting with Ravenclaw74 via our YouTube channel. Drawsteel seems to really focus on combat. Can you actually role play this with this game? Teos, what's the answer? No.
Can't.
Definitely not.
No, I'm kidding. Yeah, you can. Absolutely. And maybe that's on us to say that, we've been covering things like your characters and the combat system and things like that. But you'll see in this episode, we'll talk about respites and what that does. But, all RPG books tend to overemphasize. I wonder if there's a good example of one that doesn't, that really covers like various types of play, but doesn't. Listeners can let us know. But most games like D&D, they have an enormous page count for the combat stuff and much smaller for the other types of play. The same thing is true of MCDM's Drawsteel. Daggerheart is the same way, right? Because that part has so much to it, right? Your character is defined by things it can do. And actually, there's a really nice piece in the Monsters book for Drawsteel that talks about these statistics are like a snapshot of a monster in time to help you fight with it or against it. But it is not the only thing this monster knows, right? It's attempting to portray that. And the same thing is true of characters, right? if you look at the Draw Steel Adventures, they do a nice job of showcasing the balance between combat scenes, like where you're in a dungeon and you're just going through that Delian tomb, and that's fun. But then you come out and you go to the town, and you're just talking to NPCs, and there are quests, and you can do them in any order, and it's very sandboxy in design. There's a great latitude to decide what you want to do, and you can solve things just by talking. It may not require a roll, right? So there is a lot in the game that supports this. And things like the complication system or the respite system that we'll talk about today, those all provide role-playing story narrative hooks that change it up.
Yeah, the question that comes to mind immediate for me whenever I see terms like role playing or narrative or story driven is what's your definition of role playing?
Sure.
Right? Is role playing describing the actions that your character takes as they swing their sword or cast their spell? Or is there some other part of it? And the real question isn't, can you role play with this game? Because you can role play literally any game. The question is, how do the game mechanics meld with the non-combat parts of these games, especially these fantasy TTRPG games in the vein of D&D? How do they work with each other? Yeah. And so that's going to take us to the next question. So we have the Draw Steel is super combat focused. Can you role play? The next question from Devin via our Patreon Discord is, you've been talking more about narrative games like Daggerheart and Draw Steel. So we've got the can you role play? Now we've got it's more narrative. Maybe you covered this in the past, but how do you start developing your players to improvise, heighten, and just generally feel more comfortable making stuff up at the table? Devin gives us examples of running a game at PAX West, a game of Daggerheart, where the tables were wildly different. One embraced this sort of creativity and world building through their characters, and the other seemed like deer in the headlights when they were asked to come up with things. So the question concludes, how do you encourage players to improvise and make stuff up on the spot? How do you teach them that they can just make up a cat, which the game master never mentioned? Now, Teos, I have 6 sort of points here, and I want you to feel free to interject, to come at me, to
I'm coming at you,
to
bro.
oppose me.
Yep.
at any point.
All right.
So, one.
If you fail or if you roll with fear.
Yeah, if you roll with fear, you were going to take the spotlight and tell me how wrong I am.
Go for it.
Excellent. So, one, the first thing that's important to do as the game master, whether you have a regular set home group, whether you're running at a convention for a 2-hour time slot for one group, is ascertain their skill and comfort level at doing this sort of creation. So you can ask them directly about their experiences doing this. Hey, are you comfortable if I ask you this question that allows you to build the world with me? Ask them about their experience doing it. Ask them about their comfort level doing it. If you don't have the time to have that direct conversation with 6 different people, chat them up just a bit and try to ascertain that level of skill and comfort by saying something like, oh, you're playing a dwarf. Do you have a clan? What's your clan's standard? What's your clan's sigil? Yeah. See how they react to that. If they are full on and ready to add their details, you're probably safe to move forward. If they seem hesitant to talk about things like that for their own characters, then they might not be as ready to do it with the actual world itself. With me so far?
I am with you. Okay, excellent. Cool. Yeah, the only other thing I would add here is sometimes the newest players are actually quite happy to make stuff up because there are no boundaries, right? But very quickly they sort of go like, oh, the game is this. And so you might get new players that, you know, have watched something or they've had one minor experience, and so they don't think they can do these things. And that's, so then you lose that freedom and you have to sort of rebuild it if you want to.
Exactly. The second step is provide examples of these skills and these work products that you're going to expect of your players. So if later in the game you are going to ask them to describe a character or describe a setting or add some details to a dungeon room, you do it first. You give concrete examples of the things that you're going to ask of them. So in the first room they come to, give an example of the chains on the walls and the water dripping down. So the second time they go into a room and you ask them to add their touch to it, they have an idea of what you're looking for.
Yeah.
Uh, okay with that?
Yeah, the only thing I'd say here is that sometimes those kinds of asks, some players have a hard no about those kinds of asks, right? Of creating the world. So the more that the what you're asking of them is what they might see as the DM's role, the more that they might put up friction about it. And I can understand this. I can feel this sometimes. Like I think in general, like if my character walks into a bar and the DM says, "What does the bartender look like?" I feel like saying, "That's your job. You tell me."
Mm-hmm.
I can do it. I don't mind. And in those kinds of games, I'll lean into it. I'll have fun. It's all good. But my preference is not to do that because I want to sort of experience the world, right? It's my time playing, not DMing for one. But the more that the prompt is something that my character would bring in, right? So there are many drinks on display and there's a huge menu, including things from the part of the world that you come from. Do you want to tell me, something that would only that your character would know, or that drinks, that they prefer as a drink? Ah, cool. Now it's like a thing I know, and it breaks that immersion a little less for me.
Yeah. So Teos is talking about different kinds of creativity on behalf of the players.
Mm-hmm.
One is helping build the world. One is helping build something about their characters that they bring to the table that the DM wouldn't know, but the player is asked to imagine for their
Yeah.
character. And then there's a sort of middle ground here, which I call setting, which is different than the world, but
Mm-hmm.
it is in this immediate moment. What cool thing can you add to the setting that would help your character in combat or just in terms of interacting with the scene?
Yeah.
And that's three things that you could argue with. You could make your own, but I like to think of those as touchstones that will help bring a player from creating things about your character to creating things about the immediate environment to creating things about the world.
Yeah.
And again, different games will want different things of you.
Yeah.
D&D doesn't necessarily want the players to create these things,
Mm-hmm.
whereas something like Daggerheart does want
Yeah.
the players to create these things. And it says so in the rules. It says so in the rule book. So,
Yeah, and that's
uh,
worth noting that because in this question that Devin asked was about Daggerheart. Daggerheart
right.
specifically says you can spend hope to change up what's in a scene, right? And so that becomes an important thing to say, like, hey, you are expected to add to scenes, and as you said, it can be for combat, it can be for role playing reasons. Oh, it's the famous drink that only exists in my hometown. Like you can add that and spend a hope if required, because that's an expectation of the game that you're doing that sort of dramatic play and contributing that
Yeah.
way.
Yeah. So number three for me is as you try to bring players into this creative frame of mind, start with very small, discrete examples of the skill that you are expecting them to promote.
Mm-hmm.
So ask questions as prompts and make these questions answerable easily with short answers. So don't start with describe for me the forest. Start with what color are the flowers at the base of the tree? All you need
Mm-hmm.
to give me is one answer. You just have to say a color.
Yeah.
Then what you do is step four is provide positive and constructive feedback based on the player's contribution. So if the player says, "Oh, the flowers are actually pink," and you're like, "That's right, they're pink," and you also notice because they're pink, and then you build on that,
Mm-hmm.
and that makes them feel good.
Yep.
it makes them more receptive to your questions down the line.
Love it.
So you show that you player are going to give a detail. I am going to build on that detail. And then maybe in the future, you will give me more, or you will build on my
Yeah. Yep.
improvisations and my descriptions. So you get that loop going. Don't ever say no, right? Because
Right.
then you are reinforcing that idea that I know the world and you don't. And then the player's like, why am I even bothering?
Right. Yeah. You asked me to do this, then yeah. Yeah.
Mhm. Along the lines of modeling, you can elicit help from other players who might be more capable or more comfortable in doing this sort of work. So if you ask a player to give a detail and they're unable to, uh, maybe source another player
Mm-hmm.
who can then model the behavior and the feedback that you are looking for. So the players are learning how to do this process.
Yeah. Cool. Mm-hmm.
And the last bit is provide a new frame when you're going into a more creative mode. So you might be in a combat and all of a sudden you say, all right, what blank, right? What does the monster do? Rather than switching quickly between a combat mind focus and then a storytelling mind focus too quickly, stop for a moment and say,
Mm-hmm.
all right, forget combat for a second. Just stop. Close your eyes. Picture the dragon in your mind's eye that you're seeing right now. What does the dragon's snout look like? What do the dragon's teeth
Mm-hmm.
look like? You are stopping
Yeah.
one frame of mind and switching to another. And if
Mm-hmm.
you ask someone to close their eyes and visualize something, there's a good chance that they will be able to do so
Yeah.
and describe what they're seeing as opposed to trying to create it when they're
Right.
not in that frame of mind.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a lot easier to do because you're already probably picturing it to some extent. Yeah,
Right.
and that idea of freezing time is good too, where you let people know that they're not on the clock, right? This is not a pressure moment. So,
Yep.
you walk into this busy market square,
Mhm.
freeze that scene in your mind. What are different stalls that you see that, are interesting to your
Yep.
character based on what they like to shop for? Oh,
Mhm.
leather goods or whatever, right? And you just start rattling off whatever you think. One thing that comes to mind to me, I like your 6 points. One thing that really helps at the games that I run is the introductory montage scene. Right? When you do
Mhm.
character introductions, if you do, and we've talked about it before, and I've got a blog entry on it, but when you do a montage where you say, okay, we're going to go around the table, it's like an 80s TV show where you're going to get this
Yep.
tiny little bit of time where we see your character, the name's going to flash under the screen.
Mhm.
What is a thing that you're doing that's sort of iconic you, like typical of you? And players are usually really quite good about doing it. Every now and then, the first person might be a little bit like, low on detail, but then
Yeah.
really quickly, someone else jumps in and goes, well, I'm doing a barrel roll, across this ship. And I come up and I grab a rope and I swing and I look at the camera and, my name flashes. It's like, yep, perfect. And it's interesting how easily players can generally do that, right? They can portray that scene and depict what their character's doing with a thing that's very their character. And so you could do something like that, like, what is your room like at home, or and something that's personal to them helps them get
Mhm.
going so that later they'll feel a little more comfortable because they did it when it was about their area of the world, and then help
Yep.
them decide whether they want to do that for things that aren't their area of the world, right? You can draw that connection, build upon it.
Two games that do this very well are Dusk City Outlaws
Mm-hmm.
and Brindlewood Bay. Both of them have this opening scene montage where it does exactly what Teos is describing
Awesome.
here. So
I
check
need to
out
play
those games if you
Brindlewood.
wish.
Yeah.
Yep. All right. So we've got other stuff that we could talk about, but we have a lot of news to get into. So we're going to switch over to our news and commentary section. And we're going to start with a partnership between Netflix and Hasbro, and they are going demon hunting K-pop style. Netflix announced that Mattel and Hasbro have each been named a global co-master toy licensee for the IP K-pop Demon Hunters. Mattel will handle dolls, action figures, accessories, and playsets. Hasbro will focus on plushies, electronics, role playing items, and board games. Dun dun dun. The animated film debuted in June, becoming Netflix's most popular film of all time. I think we've seen anime go from a niche enjoyment, a niche fandom, to the mainstream.
Yeah, incredible, and very interesting to hear what will this be like. Is this a small thing like the Minecraft release was on something small free on the D&D Beyond website, or is this something bigger? Yeah, I'm curious.
Yep, we will keep an eye on any movement in the direction of a tabletop role-playing game for K-pop Demon Hunter. Uh, we also get Hasbro's quarter 3 earnings report. Teos loves to keep an eye on this, and on October 3rd, Hasbro announced these 2025 quarter 3 earnings. So we've got 4 categories. We've got Hasbro overall, Wizards, D&D, and 3, not 5, 3, sir.
Three,
So,
sir.
Teos, what does Hasbro overall look like for quarter 3 2025?
Yeah, net revenue is up 1.4 billion, which is up 8% from year to year. This was a bit higher than expected, so pop the champagne. They got another quarterly earning report where they get to talk about how wonderful life is. As usual, stocks went down because that's how the stock market does things. Adjusted operating profit is 356 million, up 8%. Consumer products toys is basically 800 million, down 7% year to year. And the operating profit is down 32%. So toys continue to be the problem, as has long been the case. I feel like we just say this every quarter. They keep trying, they keep adjusting. And entertainment is up 8% at 19 million. Tariffs were again mentioned. Hasbro said they had a $20 million impact in Q3. Remember, they took hundreds of millions off last quarter as an adjustment due to this. They expect 60 million in tariff impacts this year, assuming the China tariff rate stays at 30% and Vietnam at 20%. And they're trying various things to reduce this next year. Toys will be 30% revenue sourced from the US, 30% in China. And they talked a lot about pricing. So they say the top 20% of their spenders, they're staying steady and still spending. But the balance of households, they said, are watching their wallets a little bit more promotional and price sensitive. So it's something that they're looking at it. Where can we increase prices and where can we not?
And so that was Hasbro. So what is Wizards looking like overall for quarter 3 2025?
It's fantastic news. Wizards of the Coast continues to bail out the rest of the company. Their revenue is 572 million, up 42% from already really strong quarter last time and last year. Wizards of the Coast operating profit is 252 million, up 39%. And this means it is Wizards is 3/4 of all Hasbro profit. The operating margin is an impressive 44%. Magic the Gathering revenue itself is up 55% to 459 million. So we can see out of that 572, it is a big chunk. Licensed digital gaming is up 21%. Monopoly Go licensing revenue was 43 million for the quarter. And Wizards says royalty expenses increased significantly. So this is one downside of their Universes Beyond approach with Magic the Gathering. You do a set that's based on Marvel properties, Spider-Man, things like that. You have to pay out royalties. And so all that amazing revenue looks great, but your profit is much lower. And so they said they'll have an extra 80 million in licensing costs this year.
Wow. Now, what about Exodus? Exodus is this video game, and there's a role-playing game sort of attached to it. What was mentioned about Exodus?
Yeah, Shawn, so there was a question asked about the game's expectations and costs during the investor question answer period. And Hasbro's CFO gave a really great answer, which isn't just about Exodus, but about their overall costs with video games. She said, there's roughly $350 million that's sitting on our balance sheet. This includes development costs for Exodus as well as all other games that are within our portfolio. So it is not just an Exodus charge, it's the entire pipeline of games we're working on. in terms of Exodus and how to think about the dollar impact, when we're modeling it out, roughly kind of rule of thumb, 65% of that development cost is going to hit in the quarter that we launch the game. And in the 4 quarters in that first year, roughly 85% of that development cost will have been worked through the profit and loss. You've heard us talk in the previous calls that our development budgets are anywhere from, call it $100 million if we're working with partners, up to 200, 250 million. So that's what she's saying is the range of a video game project is from 100 to 250 million, depending on how much another partner is helping out. And so that's the absolute expense and absolute decrease that you'll see through profit and loss. So they have that kind of cost they need to make up, right, in income to be positive, right, which is substantial. So you can think of something like Exodus, that's a lot of money that game needs to make up, which is very interesting. And they have a number of games they're working on.
Yep. And that's why you often see not only video games, but movies at the last minute get scrapped, because the very generous, shall we say, tax laws allow for these write-offs to leave people who built the game and who are waiting for the game out in the cold, but saves money for the company.
Yeah, absolutely. And unfortunate that it works that way. And they can bury all sorts of costs into that as part of it. And also then save on what they would have spent to promote the game, market the game, all of that. And so they can just, call it done. This will not go forward, pretty close to the end of life, which is how you end up seeing those things where someone shares like, oh, listen to the amazing music that was made for this video game, or look at these amazing scenes. Yeah, but there was enough that caused people to say, no, stop, this is not going forward.
So we also got a little bit of news on entertainment for Wizards of the Coast. What did we learn about that?
So there was a discussion here where they said, I think we think of entertainment as a long-term brand development pipeline. There's some revenue associated with it. It's advertising that pays for itself with fantastic content partners. And I just look at that contrast, right, between video games that are the future and entertainment just sort of it's, advertising. Okay. When we've talked before that movies and video games really have the exact same profile in terms of risk, success rate, costs, it's all very similar. But continuing on with this quote, and I think at last count, we have something like 45, maybe 50 shows and movies and reality TV offerings in development across a range of partners. Wow. And we work with the best of the best. We're working with Paramount, Warner Brothers, Netflix, Universal, Disney, Lionsgate. So we'll have more to share on that as these kinds of deals matriculate. We tend to not announce like a developmental deal. We tend to wait until it's actually in production. In 2026, they'll have more to share. But 45 to 50 shows, movies, reality TV things that are in progress.
Now, we assume this is Hasbro as a whole, not just Wizards of the Coast. But imagine that, having 45 or 50 different offerings, shows, movies, all in various stages of production. Over under, for all you betting folks, over under on how many of those actually see final development and release. Maybe 1, maybe 2.
Yeah.
Who knows?
And you never know, right? If you've ever subscribed to Disney, they'll have these like little teeny like things that are just, I don't know, a tiny, BB-8 does one little show, whatever. Like, is that a show? I don't even, who knows, right? So it's really, you have to wonder what this really means. But we'll have more news about possible things on the D&D side here, but it does mean this is still obviously a big part of what the company does. It's sort of ludicrous that they can sort of shed the E1 name and properties and all that came with it, right? But they're still working on 45 to 50 shows. So that also is a really complex part of companies at this scale, that they can sell off their entertainment arm, but they're still really doing entertainment just in a slightly different way.
Mm-hmm. And so that brings us to D&D specifically. Often doesn't get mentioned in these earnings reports, but We did get a couple of mentions. Could you lead us through those, please?
Yeah, so CEO Chris Cox actually brought up D&D as part of the Magic conversation, where he said Wizards of the Coast is more than Magic. The refreshed 2024 editions of D&D's Monster Manual, Player's Handbook, and DM Guide are off to the strongest ever start for D&D books. D&D Beyond's new accessible virtual tabletop, by which he means D&D Beyond and maps, has driven weekly traffic up nearly 50% since the September launch, which is very interesting to say that, 50% increase in weekly traffic. Okay. And then in the earnings, the investor question part of it, the question and answer, there was a question from an investor saying, D&D hasn't really been discussed, but there's obviously a little bit more emphasis on the brand as you guys expand into more space. Can you just maybe help us think about what the long-term growth prognosis is for D&D relative to Magic, or maybe what incrementally it might add to Wizards of the Coast over time? And you might think back to the show where we reported that during an earnings call, they said, D&D should be a $1 billion brand, right? We've, of course, lowered that since then. CEO Chris Cox said that digital games will be a significant growth driver for D&D. And that's the first part of this, is the answer was digital games, right? They have several games in development. Over the next couple of quarters, they said their digital ambitions will come to life with D&D. Quote, and I think they're going to be pretty exciting. Baldur's Gate 3 was a seminal project. I think it really showed that if we build something that's great, consumers will come. And so there's probably 5 projects in development for Dungeons & Dragons across a portfolio, ranging from more casual and kid-oriented to very high-end action, adventure, and role-playing games. And that's in addition to a continued focus on building out kind of the core business, the core TRPG, with a special emphasis on D&D Beyond is kind of like the best place to play a TRPG. What do you think of that, Shawn?
I think that is solid, especially given the news that we will report later about the fate of one project, Sigil. But I want to talk about Sigil exactly for this reason, right?
Yeah.
Sigil was let's create the solution to a problem that we don't have.
I love it.
Let's try to hit a home run. And often when you try to hit a home run, especially in this era of baseball, you are striking out.
Yeah.
Whereas I'm going to go full baseball analogy here, right? Whereas if you shorten your swing, you are going to connect much more often and have a much better chance of at least getting on base and possibly trying to score. Yeah. And so this is what I see with this analogy, with this description from Chris Cox. We want people to use D&D Beyond. Now, when he's talking digital here, for the first part, he's talking about video games, right? He's talking about that.
Right.
But then he switches over to talk about this push to let people know that D&D Beyond is a great place to play a tabletop role-playing game. And the 50% increase in traffic because they made maps free is the shortening your swing. Let's get people onto D&D Beyond who might not already be there.
Yeah.
Let's add partner content to D&D Beyond to get more people to go there to see it. Yeah. Then we have a chance of selling a little bit more there. Yeah. So we're not going to get the $1 billion D&D revenue through this process, but we're not going to lose players. And we may have a chance of increasing engagement with our products, with the game, in a reasonable and sustainable manner.
Yeah. And I think what I hear you saying is this is one of the most healthy and reasonable CEO statements and coherent statements we've heard in a long time, right?
For sure.
Like this is something you could sign off on and go like, yeah, we're going to find some reasonable, simple, achievable ways to get people onto D&D Beyond because a lot of profit's coming from that. And we are going to swing big on various types of video game projects. Some are bigger swings than others while having this core that we develop. And it's like, yes, please. That's
And
That's a plan. It's an actual plan.
even having Mr. Cox mention the core TTRPG, right? The core game.
Yeah.
We're going to put we're going to pay attention to building out that core business. And that's what I like to hear
Yeah.
as a player of D&D.
Yeah, that's great. And in talking to staff, it sounds like there was an era where D&D had leadership that was very abstracted from what the role-playing game is, that were sort of playing these nebulous shell games of money and capital and what it can all be. And maybe now this shows that, Cox is talking to Dan Ayub, and there are actual concrete, reasonable thoughts and expectations coming together, which would be fantastic news for D&D.
Mm-hmm. And speaking of fantastic news for D&D, how big is D&D, Teos?
Yeah.
We've got some more numbers from friend of the show, Scipio.
We do, and he had a big caveat because normally what we've come up with is a way that we can measure the growth of D&D in two different ways, and they have so far been providing us very consistent numbers, right? Regardless of which way you do it, it's really close, and so you feel good that measuring something two ways produces the same result. Here we had a $10 million difference depending on how he ran the numbers. And so this leads you to a little bit of a different conclusion in terms of how D&D is doing. The method based on direct reports of Monopoly Go, right? Where if you think through the numbers that I shared a bit ago, and if you take out that Monopoly Go part, you take out the Magic Gathering part, then you can say, okay, we've got this leftover that isn't licensed in revenue. That must be D&D. And here, we get into a gray area because we know that there's the new Sorry game that is digital licensing revenue, and there are a few others, and enough time has passed that it's hard to know how big those are. And so we may be making D&D overly large by just taking out Monopoly Go because that's the one thing they tell us about. Then we have a waterfall chart method that we look at to change things over time on the charts that they provide. This may underestimate D&D for a number of reasons, errors that accumulate over time, foreign exchange rates on revenue, things like that. So that may make D&D smaller than it actually is. So from both methods, if we look at the long run average quarterly revenue that happened before 2024, before 2024 and the release of those new books, it's 66.6 million as an average quarter. Right. Mm-hmm. So we can compare also to that and say, how is 2024 doing to an average quarter before that? It's not a perfect method, but it's one way that you can look at things. So let's look at this quarter. The direct estimate says that D&D is 69.6 million, down 0.6 million from year to year. And it's up 3 million over that average of the quarters before 2024 had been released. The waterfall estimate tells us 60.5 million, down 11.3 million year to year. And that would say that you're down 6 million compared to that long run average, right? Are you up 3 million or down 6 million? Hard to tell, right? So if you're directly trying to answer that question of, is D&D doing better with 2024 than 2014? Hard to say. we don't have, with the limited data we have, we can't give you quite that snapshot. The total 2024 5e revenue lift that the new edition has brought since it launched, the direct estimate tells us 28.4 million came out of it, which is around 43% of a typical quarter. The waterfall estimate says 9 million up, which is around 40% of a typical quarter. So what I would say, Shawn, when I pull back and I look at this, I'd say, you know what? This is exactly what I'd expect to see. D&D 24 is performing like you would kind of hope and expect, given how editions generally perform, and as 2014 did, right? 2014 launched, it was really strong, strongest ever. Then it starts coming down. That is what we're seeing for 2024. What 2014 did, that you well know, is the only basically RPG to ever do this for a protracted time, is it then went back up. Probably for many, many different reasons, but it went back up, and it was both the core books that were going back up, and everything that had been created for the edition just kept selling, right? The back catalog kept setting, and all those numbers kept going up over time. And it did so right about until the pandemic hit, right? A good, nice, strong build that was historically never seen before. And the question, of course, is, can 2024 do that, right? Will the last Stranger Things season, the new Critical Role season, the great starter set that isn't part of Q3, the Stranger Things box set that isn't part of Q3, will all these things lift and increase and bring in more people? We have no idea, right? But I think right now where we are makes sense.
Yeah. Do we know if these numbers include D&D Beyond? Or
Yes,
is it
they
just
do.
core books? Okay.
Yeah, in the
Okay.
past when we've said, so here if we say like say D&D is either 69.6 million for the quarter or 60.5 million
Okay.
for the quarter, roughly half of that is D&D Beyond. There was one point where someone actually said, D&D Beyond is blah percent, and I forget what it was. It was something like, it was a little over half, and before it had been half. But we don't know whether it kept being more than half. Maybe it's hugely more than, we just don't even know, right?
So it could
Yeah.
be that revenue, it could be revenue is lower than it would be if all these people were buying hardcover books,
Mm-hmm.
but the costs are also lower because you're not printing as many books and people are
Right.
buying them digitally.
Yeah.
So, okay, cool.
Yeah. And I mean, we could talk at length about this thing of shifting, does Wizards want to shift to D&D Beyond? Well, higher profit, so you would say yes, but D&D Beyond is a platform that, grandmother does not stumble upon it the way she might stumble upon something at Target, right?
Sure.
And go,
Sure.
oh,
Yeah.
I think my nephews would like this starter set, right? And so for
Right.
me, I remain on the track of saying we need those books to be at Target and Walmart and all these places, which they
Oh, for
aren't right
sure.
now, right? There's a special Stranger Things box set thing and the Halloween display for Target, but that's it. And
Mhm.
I think that's a big loss. Corporate people might go, who cares? We're, money's rolling in through the D&D Beyond. It's so much higher efficiency, higher profit. But at some point, if you're not reaching out to that with that wider net, right, then you are
Yep.
only in this smaller audience. And D&D is the one game that can go beyond the immediate
Sure.
RPG audience. And so I'd like to see them there, right? I think long term
Yep.
that's necessary.
Okay. Well, I mean, speaking of going beyond the D&D audience, in the past, we mentioned that Joe Manganiello had written a screenplay or written some sort of treatment for a new Dragonlance television show. This was years ago. And then more recently, within the last couple of years, he made it clear that that was not going to happen. Wizards of the Coast was not interested in doing anything with Dragonlance at this time. Well, Tracy Hickman and Joe Manganiello posted both on their social media accounts. Themselves, Dan Ayoub, and Margaret Weiss at the Wizards of the Coast offices, all together, smiling, laughing, having a good old time. And what did they say? Tracy Hickman wrote, "Something is coming, ... dot, dot, dot." Joe Manganiello wrote, "We're back," in all caps. To which Wizards of the Coast social media replied, "Welcome back to the table." So, what could this mean? It could mean just more Dragonlance books, novels, role playing game products. It could be, with Joe Manganiello's presence there, a bigger entertainment opportunity. And we have already reported that there are at least 4 or 5 projects in the works uh, for D&D stuff and 50 projects at Hasbro in general. So could this be one of them, hinting at a more robust entertainment focused offering? We'll find out. But as we said, Joe Manganiello has worked on a script in the past, pitched this, and so now it looks like something might be back on the table.
It's also interesting. I mean, the last thing he did was criticize leadership, say that 2024 was not as good as 2014, and many other comments like that. But I guess it can all get forgiven. And I mean, good on Wizards to forgive it if that makes sense. You don't want people angry at you. That's fine.
Mhm.
But we'll see. I'm very curious what it is. if it's a TV show, as it, there've been discussions of how there was this Dragonlance TV show in the past. That'd be really interesting if maybe with Netflix seeing Stranger Things phase out, are they looking for something that Hasbro could provide? That'd be really, really fascinating. Dragonlance has that kind of story that sometimes we've said works better as a novel or movie than it does as a play experience, where you're trying to somehow do the same magic that happens in those books. And so maybe it'll be a great fit. We'll see.
Yep. From the hope of a Dragonlance future to the end of a virtual tabletop 3D modeled future, Sigil is no more. On the 24th of this month, Wizards of the Coast posted on D&D Beyond saying that Sigil VTT will be retired at the end of October 2026. So on Halloween Day next year, Sigil will be retired. The quote was, "When we introduced Sigil, we imagined a powerful 3D virtual tabletop where you could share maps, minis, and environments with your friends and fellow players. While that vision inspired thousands of players and creators, we couldn't sustain the level of ongoing development support that Sigil or our community deserved. That's on us. What we've learned from Sigil and from your feedback will guide how we approach future digital tools. We'll take the time to do it right in pursuit of developing the best D&D experiences possible." So they thanked fans, and anyone who used Sigil will receive a 6-month master tier credit for D&D Beyond subscriptions. If you ordered the bundle for the core books, the digital and the print books, you had earned a gold dragon for Sigil. You will instead receive digital dice on D&D Beyond to compensate that.
Those will be with you forever. They'll never, ever not be available.
Yeah.
I mean, we talked about this a little bit in the previous piece. It's D&D has had so many misses in the digital area of gaming. And there were so many signs about this project that didn't feel good. And, when they say that this quote about how they have learned from Sigil and from your feedback and how they'll approach future tools, I really hope they have, right? Which is, don't play a game of politics and allow somebody to empire build internally. Ask the hard questions and understand it ahead of time. When I went there at the summit and they didn't know what the price of this thing was, that's a giant red flag. And internally, they should have been willing to ask those questions. It's not that you have to create an unfriendly climate to innovation in your company. It's not about that, but ask the hard questions, and you can tolerate some leeway, but you must have some kind of plans. It could work this way or that way or this other way. We have 3 possible approaches. We'll pick one as we get closer. That's possible. But just when they just genuinely look at you and don't know, when they didn't know whether D&D Beyond data that you're copying over into Sigil would be live or every now and then refreshed, or, those are just fundamental questions they didn't seem to understand. How hard it would be for you to build with the terrain versus the beautiful sets they were showcasing. That's a big disconnect. And there were just so many disconnects. And we've heard the story of like the timeline to finish all the spells was just impossibly long, right? You're just not asking the right questions internally when your projects are run that way. And that's a serious problem. And Wizards has had this problem forever, right? Going back to 3E. And that's just a fundamental problem and a disconnect. And you can listen to fascinating interviews around the 4E era of how they would bring in contractors. And the contractors would go, "This will never work." So they'd fire the contractor. The next contractor would say the same thing. They'd have approaches like, hire anybody. It doesn't matter what programming language they use. We'll tie it all together later. Just rubbish approaches. And I say this with all the love for Wizards of the Coast, right? I want D&D to succeed. I want it to be great. You have to run projects differently if you want success out of there. And I hope that that's the biggest message, because it's not that a 3D virtual tabletop couldn't have been welcome.
Mhm.
right? It was the way they ran this.
Yeah, it's the issue is, and I give them all the grace in the world because tabletop role-playing games are such a different beast than any other sort of business you can imagine.
Yeah.
They're not like regular print publishing. They're not like video games. It's not like anything, it's not entertainment, right? It's not like anything that's out there. So you get someone who may be the most brilliant mind in entertainment and you bring them in to do something and they try to run it like an entertainment business when it's not.
Yeah.
You get people coming in from Microsoft, even if it's Microsoft games,
Yeah.
right? And they try to take the lessons they've learned, sometimes hard lessons,
Mm-hmm.
thinking that, all right, I've got a handle on this. And then you plug them into something they're a round peg
Yeah.
and it's trying to go into this square hole.
Yeah.
Uh, so,
Yeah. The idea
more
that every
power to them
single
going forward.
Yeah, the idea that every single player had to have a gaming level PC to run this thing, right? That you couldn't
Yeah.
possibly use your phone or a Mac, or it's just so many things that were big disconnects, and I think they're disconnects because it sounds like a really fun, flashy project, and it's really
Mhm.
great, to try to stake your career on, but there should be smart people in the room that go, wait a minute, we're not serving an individual or a department or whatever. We are serving everything. I mean, even our investors, but also the fans, the company, the brand, right? All of those things need to be served. And so you want to ask these questions of what really are people looking for in a tool? And they didn't. It's like you said. It's like that whole developing a solution, searching for an answer rather than there for a need, right? Rather than actually identifying the need first and then developing the appropriate solution. And that is hard, no doubt, right? It's a good question
Mhm.
whether to what extent people want one type of VTT or another, or any VTT at all. But we've seen with maps that the idea of something light, easy, that just gets people in seems to be a lot more effective, right? And has a much wider base. And um,
Mhm.
we'll see. I definitely, it's yet another learning lesson, and I hope this one sticks.
Yeah. Well, speaking of learning lessons, we got a little bit of a class design lesson from Spencer Stark and Rowan Hall. They are designers on the Draw Steel game. I'm sorry, the Daggerheart game. Got Draw Steel on the brain. They are Daggerheart designers. So, as part of the Kickstarter where they are funding class packs, these two Daggerheart designers did a Q&A on class design for Daggerheart. Um, they posted an excellent discussion on how the design developed. Spencer Stark said that using cards like Daggerheart does was an initial concept, and as they played with class decks, he realized it would be fun to smash two deck types together. So then they switched over to a domain system where each class would have two different domains. And so classes in these domains developed simultaneously. Uh, Rowan Hall discussed the importance of starting with the fantasy concept behind the class, the types of stories that would be told using those classes, and then the mechanics were made to support that effort. Spencer Stark also shared that the domains changed a lot from start to finish. They were refined and recombined until it all felt right.
Hmm.
They also discussed the importance of play testing and how play testing doesn't just require data, it requires understanding the message behind the data. They called it the note behind the note, if you're going to talk about film industry terms, meaning that the person will give you their feedback, but sometimes it takes effort and understanding to get what the actual change that they're asking for is based on that particular feedback. So it was a fascinating sort of look at game design, especially for this particular game. And that Kickstarter, I believe, is still going on with a link in our show notes, but it's
Yeah.
the Daggerheart class packs.
When you hear this, if you listen to it when the show drops, you'll have just a day or something to back it, something like that. So now usually these projects now allow a little extra funding time, but you're down to the wire on it. So check it out.
Awesome. And really quick, we have a couple creator corner things. Teos, you take the first one if you would.
Sure. PAX Unplugged has a Together Demo Days program, and a call has gone out for BIPOC indie game devs. If you'd like to showcase your new game at PAX Unplugged, you can apply to showcase your creation at the convention. Applications are open until October 31st. So this one also is very low time, but well worth doing. It's not a tough thing that you've got to go through, tough process. It's reasonably simple, I hear. If chosen, you get to showcase your new and in development tabletop games in the expo hall so that more diverse games and stories are shared in the PAX community. That's great to be placed in a sort of spotlight like this, so highly recommended to do it. The event is co-sponsored by SideQuest Books and Games, Worlds for All, and Nomnivore Games. There are links in our show notes, and they're kind of hard to share links, unfortunately, so it's nothing we can just read out loud.
Yep. Finally, you have 1 week left to follow the Daggerheart Dungeons of Drakkenheart Kickstarter. So next week, somewhere around the 4th, the 3rd or the 4th, or depending on whether you're in Australia or in the US or elsewhere, it'll be early next week that the Kickstarter goes live. But there are follower goals. So we already have reached 2 follower goals, which means if you back the Kickstarter at the physical level, you will receive 2 free minis. If we reach 4,500 followers before the Kickstarter launches, there will be 3 minis that you will receive if you back the physical. If you back the digital products, you will receive the STL file to be able to print your own version of these minis. So that will be going live next week. I've been working on a little bit tangentially, getting ready for the Kickstarter. Very excited to be one of the first Daggerheart third-party products out there, and it's going to be awesome based on what I've seen. Just had a meeting this morning with the team, and lots of cool stuff being discussed. So be ready to check that out and go follow it right now so you're prepared. That was our news and commentary section here on Mastering Dungeons.